Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The sun sat low over San Diego when Lieutenant Jordy McKenna stepped off the transport van at Camp Valor. The air smelled like salt and jet fuel. Helicopters thumped past the shoreline. Instructors shouted cadence somewhere behind the hangars. She adjusted her cover, squared her shoulders, and walked in like she had done it 100 times. Eyes followed her from the pull-up bars to the armory doors. Some were curious, some doubtful, a few openly annoyed. She kept her pace steady and her face calm. Inside admin, Commander Nathan Hale didn't stand. He pointed at the chair and opened a folder. His voice was flat, even. Your scores are clean. Your record is clean. Your presence here will not be clean, he said. You're assigned to Bravo. You will be evaluated every day. Earn it in silence. Jordy nodded. Understood, sir. He watched her a long second, then signed the transfer and dismissed her with a small gesture. No welcome speech. No handshake. Just work. The barracks were loud when she arrived, then not so loud. Jordy took the last empty bunk, set her duffel down, and started a simple routine. Uniforms folded tight. PT shoes under the rack. Gear laid out by use, not by pride. She didn't look up when the comments floated from the corner. That the new face was here for headlines. That training and team life were two different games. She kept going. When she finished, she laced her boots again and stepped back out. On the grinder, Chief Petty Officer Eli Navarro ran the warm-up. He had the relaxed tone of a man who had done this many times. He called the numbers, corrected stances, and didn't make a show of her being there. It helped. Formations shifted, teams broke to stations, and the day moved into sprints, sandbag carries, and rope climbs. Jordy focused on breathing and form. No wasted motion. No looks at the clock. When she hit the top of the rope, she tapped the beam, slid down, and reset for the next event. Petty Officer Mason Grady passed with a smirk that wasn't friendly. He was big, quick, and loud in the way seasoned operators sometimes are. He didn't say anything to her then. He didn't need to. The look said enough. Later, he laughed with two others by the pull-up bar. She heard her name and nothing after it. She let it pass. Lunch at the mess hall ran like any other. Trays, metal clatter, short lines, short jokes. Jordy took a corner table, back to the wall, view of the doors and serving line. She ate slowly, not because she was unsure, but because she trained it that way. Slow food. Slow heart rate. Quick hands if needed. The room buzzed. A whistle from the far table cut through it, then stopped. She lifted her cup, finished her water, and stood. No speech, no stare down. She returned the tray and walked out to the pier. Commander Hale found her there as the wind came in off the bay. You'll get tested every hour, he said. Don't perform for them. Perform for the standard. She nodded once. I know why I'm here, sir. He studied her profile against the water. Good. Keep it simple. Then he left, boots heavy on the wooden planks. Evening PT hit hard. The ocean was cold, but cold wasn't new. Jordy let the shock pass through, set the stroke, and used the current instead of fighting it. On the run back, she matched the metronome in her head to her stride. In the showers, voices bounced off tile. Some light jokes about the swim times. Someone added that the real test was tomorrow. She said nothing. Night dropped and the bass got quieter. From the barracks window she could see the deck lights of ships moving like small cities. She cleaned her weapon by habit. Bolt, chamber, wipe, oil, check. The clicks were small, crisp. Navarro passed by, tapped the doorframe, and gave a nod that meant nothing and something at once. She put the rifle away, sat on the bunk, and let her shoulders fall for the first time all day. She thought of every hour that had brought her here. The pool evolutions where a second is the gap between control and panic. The rucks that grind the feet until they bleed and keep going. The quiet talk at a funeral with a folded flag. She wasn't here to convince a room. She was here to meet a bar and hold it. If the room wanted to watch, it could watch. If it wanted to doubt, it could doubt. Lights out came. Laughter faded. Breathing settled across the bay. Geordie lay awake and listened to the bass hum through the walls. She pictured the grinder at dawn, the seawall, the rope tower, the whiteboard with assignments. She pictured the mess hall too, because that is where the noise collects when work is done. She didn't rehearse answers. She rehearsed movement. Before sleep finally took her, she set one thought in place and left it there like a packed kit by the door: show up, do the work, speak last. At sunrise, the order board would place names in pairs for the morning evolution, and there was no surprise about which two names would sit side by side, McKenna and Grady. The pairing was right there on the board when the bell hit dawn. Geordie read it once, gave a short nod, and grabbed fins and mask. Grady rolled his shoulder like he was warming up for a fight he'd already decided he won. On the beach, the Pacific felt like a wall of ice. Hale's whistle cut the wind. 2-mile amphib swim. Buddy line. In together, out together. Go. Geordie zipped her suit, checked the line, and stepped into the break like it belonged to her. Grady muttered, "Try not to make me fish you out." She answered without looking at him. "Don't zigzag." They pushed through the chop. Geordie set a steady pace, counting strokes, breathing on fours, letting the swell lift and drop without fighting it. Grady muscled the water, fast bursts, then corrections. The buddy line tugged left, then right. She adjusted, drew a straighter line to the buoy, and kept the cadence. Halfway turn, quick check, mask, fins, tie. Grady gave a thumb he didn't mean. On the return, current shifted cross-shore. Geordie angled 5 degrees and let it carry them home. They hit sand, stripped fins, and jogged up the berm. Time. Navarro logged it, eyes unreadable. Grady shook out his arms and said nothing. Obstacle course next. The gauntlet was slick from coastal mist. Rope wall, balance beams, low crawl under wire, the tower, monkey bars, then the final sprint. Hale split them in twos. On the whistle, Geordie drove clean over the wall, centered her foot on each beam, kept her hips low in the crawl. Grady tried to outpace on the tower, slipped a rung, caught himself, swore, and hammered forward. At the finish, Geordie crossed first, not by much, but enough to be clear. Times posted. A few comments died in throats. Navarro's eyebrow moved a millimeter. Break for chow. The mess hall smelled like coffee and bleach. Voices bounced off metal. Geordie took the same corner table, back to the wall, view of the room. Grady held court at the long table, big laugh going, the kind people use when they want the whole building to know who's still in charge. He flicked a glance at her and raised his voice a notch. Some people are fast on paper. Team life is different. A few chuckles followed. Geordie ate. Fork down, sip of water, steady rhythm. The noise stretched. Grady stood, carried his tray like a prop, and drifted her way with 2 shadows in tow. He stopped short of the table, all grin and edge. You swim neat, Lieutenant. Maybe you can show the class your tricks. The room got a little quieter. No Hale. No instructors. Kitchen staff froze at the sink, pretending to work. Geordie set her cup down. Not a performance, Grady. Eat your lunch. He tilted his head. Or what? He reached as if to tap her tray out of the way. The movement was small, casual, and exactly the kind of test she'd seen 100 times. Her body answered before the thought fully formed. Left hand slid his wrist offline, right foot cut behind his heel, hips turned, and gravity did the rest. His tray clattered. He hit the tile flat, breath punched out. She didn't pin. She didn't posture. She stepped back one pace, hands relaxed at her sides, voice level. Stop. The word landed harder than the fall. The room went still. One of his buddies half rose, then thought better of it. Grady blinked, got his air back, and came up to a knee, face red more from shock than pain. Geordie nudged his fallen utensil toward him with her boot, handle first. Eat. He stared at the fork for a long beat, took it, and stood. No comeback line arrived. He walked away. Chairs creaked. Conversations restarted soft, then normal. The kitchen sinks hummed again. Out on the pier later, wind in her face, Geordie watched gulls float over the bay and let the adrenaline bleed out. She hadn't planned to make a point. Points made themselves when people pushed. Boots thumped on the planks behind her. Hale stopped a step away, eyes on the water. Someone told me the mess hall was quiet today. She kept her gaze forward. It handled itself. He nodded once. Keep it rare. Proof is best delivered in training runs and mission briefs. Understood. Afternoon evolution stacked up, dry fire, room entries, gear checks. When drills paired them again, Grady didn't smirk. He called his angles clean, covered his sector, and shut up. On a breach rehearsal reset, he caught her eye just long enough to say, "Lo, you cut the current right this morning." She answered with a short nod. Use it. Don't fight it. By evening, the base settled into that heavy quiet between work and sleep. Geordie cleaned her kit, wrote a line in her notebook, what worked, what didn't, next target, and closed it. Navarro paused in the doorway, tapped the frame again, and said, "Tomorrow's the rig." Real coordination. Real noise. She said, "Got it." He added, "You've got the calm for it." Then he was gone. Lights dimmed. Conversations thinned to murmurs. In the dark, Geordie replayed the movements from the mess hall once, not to admire them, but to file them away. It had been controlled and brief. No anger. No victory dance. Just a boundary. The team didn't need speeches. It needed proof. The rig would bring a different kind of proof, tight spaces, wet steel, and timing that didn't forgive sloppiness. Sleep came hard and short. When the alarm finally cracked the quiet, she was already sitting up, boots in hand, a picture of the offshore map in her head and the checklist rolling. Meet time. Loadout. Comms. Entry order. If the day wanted a show, it would get one it couldn't laugh at. Outside, the first gray line of morning opened over the bay, and the Catalina platform waited in the dark like a test with no answer key. Briefing room lights were low, maps pinned under grease pencils, gear staged in neat rows. Hale kept it simple. Insert from the north struts, climb to lower deck, clear corridors, secure the control room, exfil on the 10. No heroics. Tight lanes. Clean calls. Geordie repeated the order of march in her head while buckling her harness, Navarro on breach tools, Geordie on point, Grady rear security, 2 more covering angles. Out on the water, the RHIB cut a thin wake. Wind was cold, steady. No chatter. Just gloves adjusting straps and the soft click of safeties. Engines died 100 yards out. Masks down. Into the black. The ocean shock was brief. Geordie set the pace along the steel legs, checked her lines, felt the current press and ease. At the ladder, she led the climb, boots finding rusted rungs slick with spray. Lower deck. No light except instrument glows and a far strip bulb that flickered. Hand signals passed. Navarro pried the service door without noise. Inside smelled like salt and oil. Tight hull. 2 left turns to the catwalk, 1 right to the pump room, then the control hub. Geordie moved like she'd drawn the floor plan. Corners pied. Muzzle low-high. Glances quick, not jumpy. A role player lunged from a side alcove and met a clean disarm to the floor. Zip tie. Quiet drag. The team kept rolling. At the catwalk, the wind punched hard and the platform groaned. A swell hit the legs and rattled the rails. Comms fuzzed, then steadied. Hale's voice cut in and out. Storm cell building west. Keep tempo. Pump room smelled like warm metal. Navarro's shoulder brushed an old valve. Nothing shifted. Geordie pushed through to the hub door. On 3. Navarro's tool bit, door released, they flowed into the control room, stacks of gauges, dead monitors, and a table dressed as an objective. Clear. Geordie clocked the timer on the board. 7 minutes left to their exfil window. She called it and turned them to the egress route. The next swell was worse. Lights browned, then snapped. Comms dropped to static. The platform shuddered. Somewhere above, a cable clanged like a bell. Grady's voice came low behind her. We just lost the net. Geordie didn't pause. Switch to hand signals. Same plan. Move. They retraced to the catwalk. Spray blew sideways now. Rungs ran wet. On the ladder down, Navarro's tether snagged on a jagged bracket. He jerked once, tried to free it, and slipped a half step. The tether bit hard, spun him, and pinned his air hose against the steel. Geordie reached him before the second jerk. One hand braced his vest, the other cut the snag clean with her knife. She reset his hose, tapped his mask, watched for the okay. He gave it. No drama. No scolding. She shifted her weight, signaled Grady to take rear and cover, and led them into the water. The current had shifted south, she changed angle and let it work for them, not against them. A minute stretched to 2. The RHIB was a dark shape, then a hand, then the hard rubber rail under her gloves. Back aboard, breath fogged in the wind. Navarro pulled his mask and let out a long exhale that was half laugh. You just saved me a busted regulator and a dumb story. Geordie answered, check your strap routing next time. He grinned and nodded. Grady watched the exchange without a joke lined up. His tone was even. Clean fix. No panic. She wiped water from her face. Fix the problem that's in front of you. Back at Camp Valor, they debriefed under humming lights with wet boots lined at the door. Times were good. Lanes were clean. Hale called out the comms loss and asked what they did. Geordie laid it out in 3 sentences, lost net, switched to signals, corrected routing, kept clock discipline. Hale wrote 2 words on the board, calm wins. He didn't look at her as he said it, but the room heard. The next day, drills doubled down on coordination. Geordie and Grady ended up paired again for room entries. He didn't push pace to prove anything. He called sectors, she flowed past his muzzle, tags were crisp. Between runs he said, you don't waste motion. She said, you don't need to fill silence. Navarro walked by and said, that's the sound of progress. Evenings got quieter. The looks in the mess hall changed shape. Less curious, more calculating, the way operators reassess someone after proof stacks up. Geordie didn't lean into it. She ate, refilled, logged notes, checked gear. Out on the pier, the bay looked the same, but her place in the machine felt different. Not accepted outright, not yet. But the grind was shifting. Respect doesn't arrive with a speech. It leaks in through small doors, clean runs, clean saves, no brag. Hale called a morning brief that didn't feel like training news. The projector showed satellite stills of a coastline and a compound that was more scrap metal than architecture. He spoke low and flat. Aid workers. Militia. No talk window. Insert from sea, clean pull, no collateral. Geordie felt the room compress a little, like air before a storm. Hale's eyes moved across their faces and stopped on hers for a half beat. She wrote the essentials, drew the lanes, and closed the notebook. On the way out, Grady fell in step. Real thing. Geordie said, that's the only test that matters. He didn't argue. He didn't smirk. He tightened his strap and said, then let's go pass it. The ribs would launch at 0200. The deck crews would kill the lights early, and the sea turned into a flat sheet of black glass under a thin moon. Geordie checked her kit by touch, radio, extra mags, flex cuffs, trauma kit, then stepped into the boat and took the forward seat. Hale's last words sat in her head like a checklist: insert quiet, confirm hostages, neutralize only what you must, clean pull. No speeches. No margin. Engine stayed low all the way in. A mile off the coast, they cut to drift. Water slapped the rubber with a slow, even rhythm. Hand signals passed. Masks down. Over the side. Cold hit like a slap, then disappeared under training. Geordie swam inland with the team in a silent line, black shoreline sliding closer until the sand and scrub took shape. They beached without a sound, pulled the boats past the wash, and moved. The compound looked thrown together, sheet metal walls, a sagging tower, diesel generator droning out back. 2 guards at the front gate, bored, rifles low. Geordie and Grady split the approach, counted the breath, and dropped them clean with suppressed shots. No alarms. Navarro cut the chain with a small shear and they slipped inside. Torches flickered in the main lane. Voices carried from a cluster of huts. A radio coughed static. Geordie brought up the thermal, 3 warm bodies in the far hut, 2 more seated nearby. She marked it on the slate, tapped Grady's arm, and moved. At the door, they stacked. Navarro cracked the latch, Geordie flowed left, Grady right. 2 guards at a table turned halfway toward the noise and never finished the turn. The 3 aid workers were tied and blindfolded. One sobbed when she said, "You're safe. We're moving now." Hands cut. Heads down. Follow my hand. They stepped back into the lane and the night blew up. A shout from the tower. A burst of wild AK fire chewed sparks out of the gate. Someone hit the generator and the compound jumped with harsh light. Geordie shoved the civvies behind barrels and returned fire in short, disciplined bursts. Navarro called movement on the east flank. Grady laid down a curtain that cut the push. The tower muzzle flash blinked high and to the right. Geordie steadied her breath, tracked the strobe, and sent 1 round. Flash gone. Comms flared. Rear element reporting militia vehicles turning in from the road. Time collapsed into actions. Geordie scanned for a clean exit and saw a shallow drainage trench cutting under the back fence, narrow, muddy, but direct to the beach path. She pointed, loud enough to cut the chaos. Through there. Civvies first. Navarro took the lead man under the arm and pulled him in. The trench filled their boots with brown water. Bullets slapped the walls and hissed overhead. Grady anchored the rear, firing controlled pairs, moving on her step count. They reached the wire, cut it, and pushed the civilians through. Past the fence the ground dipped to a dry wash. The team slid down, bodies low. Muzzle flashes popped behind them. Geordie felt the edge of panic coming off the older aid worker and put a hand on his shoulder. Breathe. Feet under you. He nodded and kept moving. On the rise to the beach track, a shooter broke from the brush and leveled on Grady at 10 yards. Geordie pivoted and shot him before Grady finished his turn. He glanced at her, eyes wide. "Don't freeze," she said. He nodded once and kept firing. They hit the sand with lungs burning. Navarro popped the flare at the waterline. Helicopter thump grew out of the dark and then slammed the air as a Black Hawk pushed low with its light off, only a blade wash and a hint of shape. The crew chief waved them in. Civilians first up the ladder, then Navarro, then Grady. Geordie took one last look at the scrub line to make sure nothing moved and jumped for the skid. Hands grabbed and hauled her in. Inside the bird, headsets went on and the world turned into rotor noise and clipped calls. The 3 aid workers shook and cried and clutched straps. Grady sat across from Geordie, helmet in his lap, eyes still hot with adrenaline. He leaned in and shouted over the noise, "You called the trench. Saved the whole tempo." She said, "We followed the plan." He gave a small, tight grin. "Then we had the right plan." Back on USS Resolute, Hale waited on the deck, face unreadable, hands behind his back. The team formed up without being told. He moved down the line, took the measure, and looked at the civilians wrapped in blankets on the edge of the pad. 0 friendly losses. Full exfil. Minimal rounds expended, he said. That's what execution looks like. He turned to Geordie. You took initiative at the moment initiative mattered. She kept her voice even. We stayed inside intent. He gave the smallest nod. Good. In the hangar, the noise dropped to small talk and the clink of carabiners. Navarro bumped her shoulder with a tired smile. You made that trench look like it was on the map. She said, it was after I saw it. Grady approached slower than usual, no swagger, just tired respect. Thanks for the cover. She didn't dress it up. We cover each other. Sleep didn't arrive easy. When it did, it was short. Morning found her back on the pier with a cup of coffee going cold, eyes on the horizon. The mission replayed clear and sharp, then faded like it should. Proof logged. No speeches needed. The team's looks had changed again, quieter, level, not defensive. Respect was no longer a rumor. Hale's summons cut through the calm by noon. Ops room. New tasking. The slide on the screen was desert, not ocean. Routes, ridgelines, a canyon cut like a scar. The brief was colder. No flags. No acknowledgement. Priority, sensitive data. Secondary, an American operative named Marcus Dane. The words carried a weight the last mission didn't. Geordie wrote the essentials and felt the room shift. The sea had tested movement. The desert would test something else. Briefing was short and cold, no flags, no acknowledgement, priority is the drive, secondary is the man, an intelligence operative named Marcus Dane. Hale didn't sell it, he just laid it out. Insert by night, foot approach through a canyon network south of Al-Mukalla, exfil by ground to an unofficial crossing. If it goes wrong, no one is coming. Geordie closed the notebook and kept her face flat. Orders are orders. Outcomes are on the team. The cargo plane's red light washed the compartment. Gear checks sounded like a metronome. Navarro tightened a strap and said, not the ocean anymore. Geordie answered, same rules, calm, clean calls, move. Grady nodded, a bandage still peeking out from the last mission's scrape. He didn't add swagger. He just said, we finish what we start. They dropped 50 miles out, bumped along a dirt track, then hiked the last stretch with sand grinding into boots and lungs. The rogue camp sat in a bowl of rock, scrap fencing, a few trucks, a radio mast, and canvas tents staked against a steady wind. Through the thermals, Geordie counted guards, marked a shifting patrol, and mapped an ingress line that hugged shadow. Grady ghosted her right shoulder, Navarro drifted left. At the tent, a cigarette ember flared. 2 guards. 2 shots. They entered low. Dane was there, tied to a chair, face swollen, eyes still tracking like a professional. He glanced at a crate to the side. Drive's in there. They know it's valuable. Geordie cut his ropes, cracked the crate, and pocketed the drive. Then the flap blew open and the world narrowed to muzzle flash and easy choices that weren't easy. Grady took one. Navarro dropped the other. Shouts detonated outside. The camp woke up all at once. They ran for the west gap. Headlamps swung. Rounds snapped off rock. Navarro tossed a flash that bought 3 seconds of air and they took it. The canyon pinched into a slot with a choke point that could be a trap or cover. Dane stumbled. Geordie hauled him by the vest and pushed him behind a boulder. Grady bled through his sleeve and shook it off with a curse. Comms were worthless noise. Geordie pointed to the rock shelf above. Charges. Navarro's eyes said got it. He planted 2. When the first wave came into the slot, she waited until the lead boot crossed the chalk she'd drawn with her knife and nodded. Navarro punched the clacker. Stone collapsed with a roar and turned the canyon into dust and echo. They moved before the cloud cleared. The ridge line opened into a shallow wash that bent toward the border track. Dawn crept in as a dull red smear. Geordie keyed for extraction, knowing the answer, and got it anyway. Negative. You're black. No aircraft. She let the silence sit for one breath. Then she looked at Grady. We make our own ride. He grinned without humor. Copy. They staggered the pace, Geordie and Dane up, Navarro and Grady half a bound back, covering sectors with short bursts when shapes appeared on the rim. The sun came fast and hard. Heat dragged at legs and turned water into a math problem. Dane tried to hand her the drive twice. She shook her head. Keep moving. He said, they told you the data is priority. She said, I heard them. Keep moving. By mid-morning, the wash funneled into a dry riverbed screened by scrub and rock. A truck engine growled somewhere they didn't like. Geordie cut hard left toward a narrow ravine she traced off sat imagery. It dropped them behind a ridge that ran like a spine to a cut fence and a line of tire tracks. A dust plume grew behind them, pursuit, but not close enough to be decisive. She raised a small beacon and killed it after 3 pings. A battered Hilux rolled out of a stand of thorn trees like a ghost stirring from sleep. The driver wore a scarf and a bored look. He said nothing, only tapped the bed. They climbed in. The ride shook teeth and thoughts loose. Dane leaned close enough for her to hear over the rattle. You could have left me. You were told to. Geordie scanned the horizon. We don't leave our own. He stared at her a long second and let it go. Grady closed his eyes for the first time since the fight and exhaled something that sounded like belief. At the crossing, a patch of dirt that meant nothing and everything, the driver stopped. A sat phone changed hands. A voice came on, dry and official. Confirm package. Geordie looked at Dane, then at the drive in her vest. Confirmed. The voice paused. Only the drive was required. You've created complications. She kept her tone level. We created survivors. The line went dead. They moved again, short ride, short walk, a gait that no one admitted existed, then the slow turn of a transport van back to a place with air conditioning and coffee and forms. Medical pulled Grady and Dane. Navarro sat on the floor and laughed once, tired and relieved. Geordie leaned her head back against the bulkhead and counted the beats until the door opened to the ops room. Hale stood by the screen with the map still up like nothing had changed. His jaw worked once, then stilled. He listened to her report without interruption: entry, contact, charges, refusal of air, vehicle assist, border. When she finished, he looked at the clock, not her. The drive is secure. Dane is alive. Then he looked at her. You'll answer for the decision. She said, I expected to. He nodded. Good. Expect it. Also expect this, men follow outcomes, not memos. Word traveled the way it always does, fast, quiet, everywhere. The mess hall didn't stare. It made room without saying so. Navarro raised a cup. Grady clinked it and said, "We don't pick easy." She said, "We pick right." That night on the deck of USS Resolute, the wind off the sea felt cleaner than the desert heat and twice as sharp. Geordie watched the water cut away from the bow and let the noise in her head settle. The desert had tested something else, what you do when the rulebook says one thing and the man in front of you says another. The decision was made, the cost unpaid, and the next morning would start the accounting. Geordie walked into the ops room with her report already signed. The table smelled like coffee and dry ink. A panel waited, 2 staff officers from Fleet, a legal rep, and Hale standing off to the side with his arms folded. They asked the same question 3 ways. Why did you prioritize the operative when the directive said the drive? She kept her eyes level. The drive left the desert with us. The operative left the desert with us. The mission objective is stronger, not weaker. They pressed. What if exposure followed? She answered, exposure follows dead Americans faster than rescued ones. Silence, then more paper. They went through the timeline minute by minute. Entry. Contact. Charges in the slot canyon. Loss of air. The ride that no one arranged but everyone had counted on. She didn't embellish. She didn't trim. She put the facts in order and left them there. Hale didn't interrupt. When it was done, the legal rep clicked a pen and said, "You directly defied a priority instruction." Her reply was steady. "I applied commander's intent, preserve U.S. capability and personnel. The drive without the man who can decode it is half an asset. With him, it's whole." The pen clicked again. "We'll make a note." The door closed behind her. In the hall, Navarro leaned on the wall with 2 cups of coffee, held one out. "Your face says they liked the report and hated the implications." She took the cup. "That about covers it." Grady came off the elevator with a fresh sling and a clean shirt. He studied her for half a second. "Do we have a job or a hearing?" "Both," she said. He nodded like that was fair. Mess hall at lunch moved different. No stares, no whispered jokes. Just the scrape of chairs and the clink of trays. Navarro dropped into the seat across from her. Danes on base. Stitches, bruises, clear eyes. He asked who pulled rank on the rulebook. I told him no one. You chose. Grady slid in, set down his tray, and kept his voice low. If they ask me what happened, I'll tell them we followed your call and I'd do it again. She didn't look up from her food. That's because you don't freeze. He smirked. Learning. Hale called her in at dusk. The sky over the bay was washed out and flat. His office was bare, a map, a safe, 3 chairs. He shut the door and leaned on the desk. Here it is straight. There will be a letter. It won't be the worst kind. It also won't be a medal. You'll get heat from people who have never stepped off a ramp into the dark. She waited. He continued. But inside this building, the standard is outcomes and integrity. You held both. The team knows it. I know it. The rest can catch up. She said, understood. He added, you could have fought the desert with doctrine. You used judgment. That's why people follow you, whether they admit it or not. She nodded once and left. Days turned back into work. Drills restarted. Maintenance, briefs, runs at dawn. The stairs were gone. Replaced with small things that matter, space made at the table, a second set of hands at the gear bench, a voice calling clean angles during shoot house reps. Geordie didn't collect any of it. She logged times, fixed small problems, and trained. Navarro joked less and watched more. Grady's swagger became economy. He still liked a big laugh, but he checked his corners first. Dane asked to see her before he shipped out. He had a paper bag with a hard drive case inside and a note from Intel about decrypted segments already saving lives. He said, "They had you choose between the part and the person. You refused the question." She said, "The work refuses it for us." He stuck out a hand. "Thank you." She shook it and moved on. One afternoon, the training schedule posted a team brief for 0900. People filled the room and settled. Hale stood at the front with nothing on the screen. He looked at the platoon and spoke plain. "There's no speech today. Just clarity. We did two things right the last cycles. We kept our heads and we kept our people. That's the standard." He let the words sit, then dismissed them to the grinder. Out on the pier that evening, the wind off the water cut through the heat. The USS Resolute sat beyond the breakwater, deck lights strung like a runway to nowhere. Geordie took her spot on the bench and breathed. She thought about Coronado mornings and desert nights, about the mess hall floor and a trench through a fence, about how respect doesn't arrive with applause but with responsibility that doesn't go away. Navarro joined her, said nothing, just watched the water. Grady showed up a minute later with a protein bar he didn't want. He tossed it to her, missed, picked it up, and set it beside her. "Progress," he said. She shook her head and almost smiled. When darkness took the last color out of the bay, she stood and looked down the pier like it was a lane on the grinder. The lesson wasn't complicated. Do the work. Keep your voice level. Take the right risk at the right time. Leave places better than you found them. She didn't need the room to say it back. The room had already moved. Lights out hit. The base settled. Somewhere a helicopter lifted and rode a thin line of sound across the sky. Geordie lay on her bunk and let the engine noise fade to a hum. Tomorrow would bring another board, another lane, another test that didn't care who you were yesterday. She closed her eyes with the same thought she said on that first night at Camp Valor: show up, do the work, speak last. And when the names went up on the board again, no one would blink to see McKenna paired with anyone. That was the point. She was not a statement anymore. She was part of the standard.